This is Kat Meyer. I'm the conference chair for O'Reilly's Tools of Change, and I will be introducing Pete Meyers, who we're extremely happy to have on hand here today. I just want to do a quick shout out to Ingram Content Group, who is our sponsor for today's webcast. Ingram Content Group, Inc. is the world's largest and most trusted distributor of physical and digital content. Thousands of publishers, retailers, and libraries worldwide use Ingram's products and services to realize the full business potential of books. Ingram has earned its lead position and reputation by offering excellent service and creating innovative, integrated solutions. Ingram customers have access to best-of-class digital, print-on-demand, inventory management, wholesale, and full-service distribution programs. Thank you so much, Ingram, for sponsoring today's webcast, and it's my pleasure to introduce Pete Meyers. Pete, take it away.
Hey, thanks very much, Kat. It's my great to be here. Great to be back for round 2 of my Digital Bookmaking Tools Roundup, and to just kind of jump right into the sort of focus of today's webcast. I'm really this time thinking about digital book publishing in a really broad way. I think everybody who's tuned in today knows that digital books aren't just plain vanilla EPUB files. And as publishers and writers, we all need to think about how to create things that get more complex than simply taking a print book and recreating it as an EPUB file. So while I'll touch a little bit on some sort of traditional ebook publishing tools, I'm going to also spend more time today than I did during the last webcast on how to create publications and creative productions that most of us, or many of us, might not even recognize today as books. The common thread that sort of connects all of the tools that I'll take a look at today is that no markup or programming is required. I mean, I think everybody at this point knows that if you're a HTML, CSS, Objective-C, Java jockey, then you have a lot of options in terms of creating EPUB and apps. But what's much more difficult is for that broader audience, the English majors out there, who want to participate in this digital publishing revolution, and yet are looking for sort of more humane, more user-friendly tools. So that's one of the things that I'm looking at today and going to be talking about today. The other thing is that a number of the tools that I'll focus on are not so much focused on, or not so much sort of tuned towards creating actual products that you can sell in the marketplace. Instead, I see some of the things that I'm talking about more as a way to let all of us start practicing, if you will, on different ways to create things that don't necessarily look like plain prose books. I'll get to a few of the specific examples ahead. And one last point I just wanted to make before I jump into the actual tour is the selection criteria that I used. This is not a Consumer Report style comprehensive review. I did not go out and test, 500 different ways of creating a digital book. Instead, what I tried to do is use the 5 categories that you're looking at on the screen right now. Use those as sort of broad groupings of the kinds of things that I'm getting a sense that more and more people want to create. Focus on one or so tools in each category, and pick from the many, many choices that are out there, tools that seem to fit a number of criteria that I, started to use, which is, will they create a pretty high-quality product? Of course, that's something we all want. Are they more or less easy to use? There's a lot of homegrown software out there that's not very easy to use. Is there support and documentation available? And finally, does the company give some sign that it looks like it's going to be around for a little while? There's a lot of startups out there. This part is a real subjective call, I think, on my part, but I tried to only include tools from companies that felt like they were, they had the legs to sort of stick around. Finally, any tools that I mentioned, and it'll be about a dozen or so, maybe even a few more, are going to be listed up on my blog, newkindofbook.com. So you can go there afterwards if you want to take down URLs. The categories on the screen right now are, again, it's the overview of the kinds of tools that I'm looking at, and I'll go through them very quickly, sort of a bird's eye tour. Very basic ebooks I'll start with. Kids books is the second category. These books, apps with motion and sound. A third category that's starting to grow a bit, I think, is template-based apps, and that's the ability to create, more or less highly customized apps, but using templates that some of these developers have created. The fourth category is media mixers, which is a real interesting area. A lot of creative possibilities there, where people are starting to mix together, movies and images and sounds and text in ways that I don't think we've ever seen. Well, we certainly haven't seen before in print. And then finally, to wrap up, a tool for some authors in training, and I'll get to that in a second or towards the end. But to start with, this first category is one that I won't spend a ton of time on. We know all probably pretty well. These are basic EPUB ebooks that anybody who is writing long-form narrative needs to figure out a way to get out there. And it's still pretty difficult to do, especially with all the different publishing channels that are available, from Amazon and Barnes & Noble to Apple and Kobo and on and on. So the tool that I wanted to focus on here is a startup tool called Pandemian. What you get if you use Pandemian, before I even get into how it works, is what you would recognize. This is a look at how a Pandemian book looks like in iBooks, but you end up with a traditional digital or ebook that we would all recognize on any of the dedicated e-reading devices or reading apps that we have on all of our smartphones and tablets. The authoring environment, the way this tool works, is really straightforward. It's a web-based tool, and the sort of the process that they have constructed, I think, is very straightforward and mirrors the way that a lot of us work. You can write, you can revise, you can respond to people's comments, be it an editor's or a community that Pandemian lets you publish to. And the actual writing tool itself is something that's very recognizable and will be very familiar to anybody who's used Microsoft Word, WordPress, any blogging software. No coding required, no markup required, just simple icons for styling the text. So very straightforward to use. There are a few points in the process, in the Pandemian book building process, that I think take care of the things that really start turning into a bit of a headache for aspiring authors, be they independent or at a small or a medium-sized publisher. And those have to do with things like the cover and marketing information, what it's going to say about your book when you go to, Amazon's catalog page. And Pandemian helps you out with that. They don't help you with the design or anything like that of the cover, but as long as you can make your own art for the cover, and as long as you can write a little bit of what's known as catalog copy, they really make it easy to sort of put all that information and associate it with your book. And then on this screen is really the juicy heart of the Pandemian service. It's where, after composing and importing your book, you can either, import from a word processing program you've used separately or write directly in the web browser. But once you've done all that stuff, when you get to this screen, this is where you're one button away from outputting really any of the main formats that you would want in today's ebook publishing world. That is EPUB for almost everyone, Mobi for Amazon, PDF for the people out there who still want PDF, and then there's even a plain text option. But this is really the heart of the service. Once you put all your words in there, this is what gets you a file that you can take away and submit and do what you want. So very, very nice, simple, straightforward tool. They're currently in beta right now. It's a free service. Really impressed with how nice and friendly and responsive the folks are behind this. They're, of course, alone, as I alluded to earlier. I could list dozens of other companies here. The two I'll call out that are interesting and worth taking a look if you're looking to do something similar is Pressbooks and LeanPub, both very similar kind of approaches to the same problem or to the same challenge. The next category that I want to take a look at is what I think we would all recognize as kids books. These are books where you want the ability to combine art and sound and motion. Someone once described it, I heard, as books that beep, and I think that's a pretty fair way of describing what the tool in this category, Interactive Touch Books, allows you to do. Just to begin with, first of all, just a quick glimpse of what you actually get if you use the Interactive Touch Books authoring platform. You get, I think what we'd all recognize as a standard kids book app. You supply the art and the words and the sounds. This is material that you would create on your own in whatever program you use, be it Photoshop or anything like that. You bring all that to the party, and then what Interactive Touch Books helps you do with its tool is composite it all together and add in the effects like audio effects and some read-to-me services and some, the interactive touching kind of features that I'll get to in a sec, but that we all at this point I think recognize when we open up a kids book app. So pretty straightforward, but my point here is that what you get here is something I think that we would all universally recognize as what, it's almost funny to say, but at this point is a traditional kids book app. The other thing that you get is inclusion in a sort of shopping catalog that is part of their app. So the setup with Interactive Touch Books, it very much resembles the iBooks app and comics apps like Comixology, where the app itself is both the reader for the material, and it's also a shopping catalog. So you can read books, and you can also shop for other books. What Interactive Touch Books is targeting, the problem that they're targeting in the same way that Comixology is targeting this, is the problem of discovery. And it sort of goes like this. If you want to create a kids book app and submit it to the App Store, the iOS App Store, you are facing a ton of competition. You're dealing with literally tens of thousands of other kids books apps, and the challenge is, how do you get discovered? What Interactive Touch Books is doing by combining everything into one app is making the argument that they're aspiring to raise their collective profile higher than all the individual apps out there, so that if you use their service, you become part of their app, you use their tool, and the argument goes, stand a better chance of people discovering you, because people who are reading books in this app have a good experience, and then they're going to come back in the app and look for more. In the first 6 months of their launch, which was earlier this year, they had about 60,000 downloads of the app. So I'll leave it to everyone out there, and I sincerely, I make no judgments. This is, some people might think they've got a lot of traffic. Other people might be looking for more, but for sure they're identifying a significant challenge, which is, how do you get your kids book app noticed in such a crowded place? So a little bit about how their actual tool works. And this is it's a web-based tool, and what you're looking at here is kind of step one in the process, and it's very simple. The screen you're looking at here is the place where you would add a cover and some descriptive information about the book and a few screenshots for promotional purposes. Very straightforward. no coding required, very easy to use. Here we get on to the next step of the book creation process, and again, this is all web-based. This screen shows where you start adding the art and other kind of media components that you want to make up your book. And then on the next screen, the one that you're probably seeing right now, is where you add in the actual interactivity. And here's where you can do things like get elements on screen to move around and be interactive and add, sounds and stuff like that. It's very straightforward. It's not going to let you do the most sophisticated animations in the world, but if you can, use a menu system and click add page action, you can use this, and it works very well. So huge advantage for people who are trying to figure out how they would, possibly put together an app like this. So really worthwhile, I think, kind of competitor in an increasingly crowded category. Some information up on the screen right now about their business model and the 70% cut that they take after Apple takes its cut. Very easy to use. A big advantage here is you don't have to mess with some of the challenges around getting your own Apple developer account. That's not the most complicated thing in the world, but there's so many logistical details involved that it can add up to be a bit of a headache. So you don't have to deal with any of that. You can operate completely within the interactive TouchBooks environment. A few other competitors I just wanted to mention in this category, definitely worth taking a look at. Moglu, a product from DemiBooks called Composer, and Book Creator from an outfit called Red Jumper. So all really interesting and worthwhile tools for people who are looking to do kids' book apps.
Hey, Peter.
Yes.
Questions from the listeners, especially in regards to interactive TouchBooks. Do you come away with a file you can submit to other vendors?
I'm gonna back off on that question because I don't know the answer and I don't want to guess at it. So I'm gonna not guess at it. They're very responsive. They have a fair amount of information up on their site. I'm suspecting that info is in the FAQ, and certainly I'm sure they'd give you an answer. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, great.
But clearly by design, just one last, but the main thrust is to operate within their environment. For sure, I know, one thing I can say for sure is that you certainly retain the rights to all your material and the right to publish in other formats, including print. But whether you actually get a file that you could use somewhere else, I'm not sure.
Okay, thanks.
This next category, I'm kind of tentatively calling template-based apps. I think I'm still casting about for the best name for it. But the heart of it is that, creatively complex publishing ideas require apps. I think we all know that right now. I think everyone, sees EPUB 3 and the promise of that standard as giving us hope that someday everything, all the really complex stuff won't need to be an app, but we're not there yet for sure. But the challenge then is, so how do you create a real app, something that does sophisticated, complex, customized things without having to spend $50,000 and on up, or learning how to develop in either Objective-C or Java. And one solution I think that's starting to emerge is the creation of these code-free app-building software. So unlike, or a little bit different than the interactive TouchBooks that I looked at just before, which was really focused on creating kids' book apps. This class of tools is meant to let people who have ideas and visions that go beyond simple sound, motion. And the tool that I want to look at in this field is from a firm called Red Foundry. And to start off with, I just want to give you a couple of slides worth of a look at an app that was released just within the past month or so. It's called Read, and it's an RSS reader, completely used, created in Red Foundry, and you see up here two screens, two iPad screenshots side by side, and then here are another two screenshots. And the takeaway here is that you really can start doing some fairly complex things, more I'll get to in a second, but you really can start doing, as your vision for what is going to go into your book app becomes more complex, you can start using a tool like Red Foundry to sort of make all that happen, again, without coding. So here's a look inside the actual software itself. It's web-based, like everything I've talked about so far. A sort of quick, soup to nuts view of the process is you pick some designs and the features that you want to include from templates that Red Foundry lists out. You add in your content, and then you publish here you do publish yourself as an Apple developer with your own Apple developer account. So you're using their tool, and then you're publishing yourself, which a lot of people, especially as you start getting into small and independent publishing companies, want the ability to publish under their own developer account so that the name appears as them and not some third-party software company. But to get into a little bit more detail about what you're looking at here is more or less the first phase in the development process, and you really get to pick and choose from some fairly sophisticated choices and options. I mean, you really can you can pick from a list of templates that gets you things like menus and the ability to add photo layouts and audio and music and videos and movies and social widgets, almost anything you can think of in a standard kind of a complex app that's in the App Store today. You really will be able to, you'll be able to find in this catalog of templates that they've made available. The next thing that I wanted to show is on this screen. I mean, it may seem like, a little bit of a small detail, but they even help you with challenges like creating an icon that's suitable for your app, both in all the various places that it resides. So, for example, in the Apple App Store, on somebody's iPhone, on somebody's iPad. These are all pieces of art that require different dimensions. And it may sound like, well, big deal, but this stuff is what actually starts getting very complex, and all the logistical details start adding up. And this is where people, I think, start appearing like amateurs or professionals. And by using a service that has sort of keeps refining the process of publishing an app, you get to take advantage of them learning from all the things that you end up making a mistake on if you're just getting started out. So a nice little feature there. Another thing that's really cool about the Red Foundry system is that they use a previewing app that is really for your eyes only, and by the way, for anybody on your team or any client that you work with. It's an app called Viz that won't be available to anybody in the App Store, anybody publicly, but you can use it so as you're adding content and features and templates to your app, you can preview your app as it's being built. So a very nice way of kind of keeping tabs on how the thing is looking as you're putting it together. And then finally, this is just a quick look at the dashboard of the sort of dashboard view in the tool, and this gives you a little bit of a glimpse of the process from start to finish, but it also gives you a peek at some of the other benefits and tools that you get when you use a service like Red Foundry, or for that matter, many of its competitors. In Red Foundry's case, you get things like a content management system. So if you don't have one either that you've paid for or you've built in-house. They have one ready to use. They have a pretty nice analytics tool that lets you keep track of how people are using your app. And then they also have a very nice push notifications feature in this dashboard console, so that if you want to do things like have your app push out notifications, they've taken care of the coding work required. So really kind of very interesting way to think about starting to publish apps that are starting to get a little bit more complex and more customized, but again, without requiring any hands-on coding. Other cost I did want to mention in this is really no cost to start out. You can actually use their tool to create whatever you like, and the costs start coming in as you start publishing. They do have a promotional offering right now to create a pretty limited but functional app for nothing, and then those costs go on up to about $600 a month for people who want to include more sophisticated features. Competitors out there worth looking at are GenY, AppMaker, My App Builder. There are plenty of others, but those are a few that I wanted to mention. This next category is really one personally that I'm really excited about personally, and it's the heart of the challenge here, or the heart of the opportunity, is about thinking about ways to integrate and not just add different kinds of media. I think everyone, really since the dawn of the web, has been trying to sort of think through this question of how do we create things that do more than what books do in print? How do we add in audio and motion and video and links? And I think while all of the publishing tools that exist today, or most of the ones that exist today, make it possible, what they make difficult is giving creators and creative people the ability to mix this stuff together in an aesthetically pleasing way. So the tools that I'm going to look at here, and there's going to be 3 in this category, I think offer some real interesting promise for people who want to start experimentally thinking and practicing with this whole notion of how do you put stuff together in a way that is creating new kinds of content and new kinds of stories and new kinds of reading experiences. I'll move a little bit more quickly in this category, not go quite as deep, because really the goal here, as I mentioned at the beginning, is not to create products that you can sell necessarily in some app store somewhere. It's more, I think, about just starting to get people to practice and play with these tools and see what kind of compositions they can create. The first tool that I want to look at is a website called WebDoc. It's basically, in a way, it's a souped-up blogging tool. One way of thinking about it is if you could take Apple's software Pages, its word processing / page composition tool, and if you could use that to publish online, then you would get WebDoc. Or another way to think about it is if you could take Dreamweaver or InDesign and actually make them easy to use, then you would get WebDoc. And the heart of the sort of unique proposition that you can see here is right away apparent in what's going on in that blank authoring canvas. We see all those different elements kind of mushed together, text and images and video and sound, all laid out in kind of a collage-like manner. And what I think is happening here, and I think what's worth noting, is that in so many other publishing tools, like ranging from Microsoft Word to WordPress, I mean, the list really goes on and on. The paradigm is all about sequential layout. So you have a headline, and then you have a paragraph of text, and then you have an image, and then you have a subhead, and then you have another paragraph of text, and then you have an image. So it's this real kind of toilet paper-like layout where one thing follows another. It's actually very difficult, if you think about it, to get a tool that really helps you move away from that sequence and get you thinking in terms of what I think of as collage. And this is what WebDoc does. It really lets you take all these various media elements, text and images and videos and sound, and put them together in new and interesting way, and really makes it easy to do things like you'll see here. I didn't do a ton here, but I just played around a little bit with like tilting the headline just a little bit, and then on the right-hand side there are these apps that you can integrate. Very easy way. Bring in things like polls and countdown clocks. What I'm showing here doesn't really do justice to what this thing can do, because it really is this very easy to use creative canvas that you can make these collages on and then share online. So I think a fun place to start kind of testing out what you can do. The next one is pretty basic, but also kind of interesting. It's called Blurb Mobile, and it's an iOS-friendly storytelling tool. You start with photos, any photos you've taken or that are in your collection. You add a little bit of commentary, and then you share these stories. Not that complex a tool, and there's certainly a zillion other ways out there to get this done, but I like how the Blurb Mobile is really looking to, A, make it easy to use, and B, give people the storytelling tools at the point when they're actually probably taking the material, that is the photos, to create the story. So it's a very simple three-step process. The first thing you do is you take pictures that you want to build your story around, and you can either use the iPhone or the iPad's camera, or you can bring in photos from Instagram or any place like that. Step two is very simple layout options. They make it drag and drop easy to move things around and choose from a few different kind of layout templates. And here is also where you add commentary in the form of captions and audio. Again, very basic, but it's very interesting to think about getting to the point where you can start composing a story, and then, as you'll see in this next screen, sharing it. They take care of, once you decide you're ready to share it, they post it online for you, and then you can tweet about it or put it up on Facebook. But the interesting thing in here is you don't have to have a blog to post it to. You don't have to have a website. They post it for you. Again, for some people, probably not a big deal, but I think this starts getting the ability to tell stories out in front of a much kind of wider audience. Incidentally, one other thing worth mentioning is that their parent company, Blurb, without the mobile in it, is a pretty impressive print bookmaking operation that's sort of centered around making print books out of photo collections, and they do really beautiful work there. So it's kind of interesting to think about how the relationship is emerging between companies, tool providers that are helping people publish online and also publish in print, which of course is not going away. People love to have print takeaways. The next company here is a little bit of an oddball, but it's called Polyvore, and the reason I call it an oddball is not because of the company itself, but it's a fashion blogging company. It's actually a site that hosts tens of thousands of really personalized, very visual fashion blogs that all of its members create. They put together things like, what to wear this winter, or a tribute to Alexander McQueen, or my favorite handbags. So you may be asking yourself, well, why is this in a webcast about digital publishing tools? And the reason it is because of this tool that they include in Polyvore, which you're looking at right now. It's called the Polyvore Editor. And it's the tool that everyone gets when they sign up for a free account there, where you can create your own layout, a very highly customized layout. The canvas on the left-hand side is where obviously you kind of do your composition, and on the right is a catalog of items, everything from a huge inventory of mainly women's fashion items to things like text creation tools and arrows and frames and shadows and stuff like that. And as I was showing earlier with the WebDoc tool, all this stuff is highly customizable, and you're not kind of stuck in this rigid sequential environment environment of having to do text, then text, then image, then text, then image, you really can start playing around with composition. I just put together something very quickly that just gives you a hint of how you can start tilting things and bringing in magazine articles and pointing from one thing to another in the hands of a skilled designer. As you can see here, somebody put together a tribute to the Clue, that game Clue. It really starts being something that's kind of really attractive and fun to play with. And the interesting kind of commerce angle here is that all the elements in the Poly4 catalog are linked to where they're available for purchase online. So if you hover over an item, as I did here with one of the characters' cards, you get a link to where you can buy it, and it for me is a way to start really thinking in new and different ways about what digital publications can be like and what they can do and how they can sort of work differently than print. Just to wrap up this category, two others that I wanted to mention. Storyfy is one that you may have heard of. It's a new tool that sort of does a lot of what WebDoc does, but is even easier to integrate social media creations, posts from Twitter and Facebook, status updates. And Hype is an HTML5 composition program that's available for Macs that is a really interesting, I think, kind of attempt to get in the hands of non-coders the ability to do complex animations, really worth checking out. One other late-breaking development that I think learned about this about a half an hour before I came on is an app, an iPad app that just released today called Mixel, M-I-X-E-L, from the former design director at the New York Times web operation called Khoi Vinh, and it is also a collage creation program. And I played around with it for about 2 minutes, but it looks like an incredibly fun, free way to kind of think through how to sort of create these collages and to think about the new kinds of things that you can do with them. And then finally, I wanted to wrap up with a category that I'm not quite seeing appear on screen yet. Maybe it's making its way up. Hopefully it'll get up there in a sec. But I think of this category, this last category, and it's a single tool that I want to look at as authors in training. And the software that I want to look at here is it's an iPad app called Toontastic, and it's completely and it's unmistakably a tool meant for kids, and it's a way to get kids creating and telling their own stories and designing and making for themselves rather than just consuming and viewing. I think that the iPad, as well as tablets in general, sometimes get a bad rap as these kind of content consumption devices. And I think it's really interesting to think about how they can let, especially a kind of younger generation, start participating in the act of making stories. And I think it's really interesting to think about how this next generation of kids are going to start, how their storytelling abilities are going to evolve as they spend more time with touchscreen devices. So with Toontastic, it's really straightforward. The tools start out as when you start creating your first animation, your cartoon animation, you get this really neat opening screen, which I think starts giving the kid an idea of how stories tend to be constructed along that kind of narrative arc between setup and conflict straight through to resolution. So I love how they kind of get kids thinking about, how to tell a story. The next thing that the kid gets to do is to pick the setting. And there's dozens of pre-made, ready-to-use settings that anyone can choose from. But there's also a draw-your-own option. So for people out there who are thinking kids are never, ever going to draw again, I think this is a good example of where you can give, you can let people pick pre-made stuff, and you can also let them draw themselves. They also get a similar opportunity to pick characters to populate their story. Again, pulling, if they want, from a catalog of pre-made characters to also drawing their own. And then the animation creation tool in the app is it's really neat, and it's very simple, and it does what you'd expect. You put your finger on the screen, you move your character around, you add narration while you're moving it, and then the finished story plays that all back to you. But it's very simple for a kid from 4 to 14 and on up to operate. And then of course, you get the ability to share. You can either share it privately, with other people you're showing your iPad app to, or you can post it up on a sharing site that they have. So I think it's a perfect time to get kids, while we're all struggling to think about how to create these new kinds of digital books, it's great to start getting kids thinking about how they will tell stories using simple tools like Toontastic. I'm happy to get to questions in a sec if there are any out there, but I did want to kind of wrap up with just some general thoughts. As I think you probably are getting a sense of from some of the tools that I talked about today, I think the trend is that everything is getting, what I would call more civilian friendly. The coding is still required for the highly complex, highly and intricately customized apps and digital book creations, but more tools are starting to emerge, and there's a ton of competition among these tool makers in trying to get into regular people's hands the ability to create really great stories. The second thing is, a point that I sort of touched on throughout, but I really think it's worth repeating, and that's the importance of practice and play. I think we know from hundreds of years of experience how to create plain text narratives, and while it's still somewhat of a challenge to get all the digital versions of those out onto all the various platforms, the thing that we don't yet really know how to do as a creative community is how to tell stories in different ways in using the collage canvas that I talked about earlier. So I love some of the tools that I talked about, like WebDoc and like Polyvar, just to start playing around with, to helping us think through how to create these new kinds of productions. And then finally, just a quick kind of tangential prediction about 2012. While many of the tools I talked about today don't currently offer the option to create Android-friendly apps. Some of them do. I didn't go into details. Obviously, as always, a very iOS-skewed kind of presentation because that's where the money is right now. But that all said, I think that's changing. I think with the arrival next week of the Kindle Fire and the Nook tablet, Android will turn from a platform that, as it has been over the past couple of years, is very crowded to a crowded platform where people are actually starting to make money. I think for the next couple of years, Apple will continue to make the lion's share of the profits, but I think that the story for 2012 is that it finally will start to make sense for many authors and publishers to start coming out with apps in the Android version because of the emergence, particularly of the tablets from Android, from Amazon, and from Barnes & Noble. So that's it for me. As I said at the beginning of the webcast, all the companies and the tools that I mentioned, I have URLs for all those up on my website, newkindofbook.com. Hopefully, if you are interested in going from tools to thinking about some of the design challenges in terms of making these digital books, you'll be interested in my book, which is coming out in the next couple of weeks, the preview edition called Breaking the Page, Transforming Books and the Reading Experience, where I really try to give people advice and guidance and a tour of all the different design solutions that are out there as we start creating these more complex kinds of digital books. I'm happy to take any questions if there's anything out there.
Yeah, great, Peter. Thanks so much. This was really informative. And we have a number of questions. And actually, you got to one of the big ones, which was about platforms other than iOS. And you kind of addressed that Android should be coming around the corner. Carolyn asks, her experience has been that WYSIWYG tools create bloated bad code. Do you know how compliant the generated code of these tools really is?
Agreed and no. So yeah, they do. This is the downside to using WYSIWYG tools. The code is historically and in so many cases not particularly friendly. I've seen some demos actually a little bit of hype and the code that's the HTML5 software that I mentioned earlier and the code that it creates, and it seemed to be a little bit cleaner than you normally get. But I think if you're looking for clean code, if you're looking for the kind of elegant, concise code that any programmer, really respects, you're not going to use a WYSIWYG tool. Now, I will say this. I don't mean to damn all of these tools without having opened the hood and really looked into all the files that they create, and so I can't say firsthand. But my bias going in would be that that's the trade-off you get, and I would just leave it with that caveat that I have not inspected any of these files, under the hood, just to look at the code itself. Okay, fair enough. Jay asks, do any of these applications have XML integration? Red Foundry definitely does. And then there may be others. I'm trying to think off the top of my head whether, Pressbooks or LeanPub has, and those two at least are worth investigating. Okay. And let's see. There's been a few questions that kind of all come down to the same point, which is what's the cheapest way to make and share enhanced ebooks? So out of what you've seen so far, what is the most inexpensive? Well, you can't beat free, right? So Pandemian, but then, obviously the question of what exactly is an enhanced ebook. In the simplest, most generic kind of way that I think is sort of circulating out there to describe that or to meet that, is prose plus links and images and maybe a movie or, maybe a little bit of video. Pandemian can't do that. So what's the simplest? I will say this. I got a demo the other day of the tool that Book is about or getting close to releasing to independent authors as well as small, medium, and big publishers to create what I think would probably qualify as an enhanced ebooks. And I don't yet know the particulars of how they're going to price that, although it sounded like for smaller operations like independent authors, it was going to be fairly comparable to, say, running a blog, like a fairly modest monthly, fee. But so that's a little bit of a wandering answer. But you certainly, if you just want to do basic ebooks, you can't beat free with Pandemian. LeanPub also has some really nice pricing plans. So the one you previously just mentioned that is in beta is Book? Well, no. So Book is, I think they're calling themselves I'm not sure what they're calling themselves, whether it's pre-beta or alpha or what, but that will be, they're definitely going to be launching, but it sounds like by the end of this year. It's not out. It's in a very small beta right now, and I think over the next couple of months they're opening that beta up to a larger group. But the reason that when you talk about enhanced ebooks, most people I think probably know Book has a couple years of experience creating these ebooks that are souped up with video and lots of other things. And the tool that they showed me is certainly getting towards putting the tools in the hands of independent authors, the ability to create ebooks that sort of look and act like the books that have been on sale for the past couple of years.
Great. Jay also asks, other than Red Foundry, what other applications do you know of that have CMS capabilities?
None off the top of my head, which absolutely doesn't mean that they aren't out there. I just don't know the CMS question. I didn't chase that one down and research that one too thoroughly. There's got to be. I would suspect even on that list of other sort of competitors or entrants to the template creation category, but I don't know off the top of my head. I do, I looked a bit at the CMS tool, both the tool that they've created, that Red Foundry has created, and the way that they will integrate with an existing CMS, and it looks pretty nice.
Kenny asks if you could give your 2 cents on InDesign.
Well, I'm tempted to do the can't put lipstick on a pig kind of, answer, that's not nice. That's probably too cheeky of me. I think InDesign is a great tool for creating print publications. It's unrivaled, rivaled maybe only by Quark Express, right? If you want to create a beautiful print book or a magazine, then it's a great tool to have. Now, I think for obvious reasons, Adobe has decided that, hey, we want to soup up InDesign and make it interactive publication friendly. So they added in the ability to export EPUB files, and they launched the digital publishing suite that lets you add in, what we generically think of as interactivity and multimedia. But to me, it's 10 years from now we're going to look back and we'll be like, that's nuts that people are using InDesign to create digital books, right? I just think it's trying to sort of add on features to a piece of software that it does an amazingly great job of creating print publications, and to try to get it to do digital stuff is probably not. It's not what I would choose if I was starting out. Now, I'm not running an operation that has, a huge print back catalog and legacy print operation to support. And if I was doing that, I probably would spend a lot of time thinking about how to get InDesign to, satisfy my workflow for both print and digital. But if I was a young, getting started small publisher, I wouldn't come close to using InDesign.
Okay, well, that's fair enough as well. I'm going to ask a question. Agatha, who's in Nairobi, had asked us earlier, as web-based tools, do any of the platforms that you talked about require a lot of bandwidth to work properly?
I would say almost all of them. And again, I didn't do anything resembling a rigorous test with a slow internet connection. My connection that I work from is pretty speedy. But just thinking through the kind of content being transferred between, the web browser on my end and the the servers that the software providers are running, it's a significant amount of stuff. So I think it would be, I would absolutely not say that it's not worth experimenting with, but if you were going to experiment, I would start, with, just to almost pick an arbitrary figure with, files that were, less than 5 megabytes and see how that goes. And then if that worked well, then move up to the next kind of tier. But I wouldn't imagine that they would. I would imagine all of them have some pretty taxing requirements, especially, of course, as the author and the publisher starts, including more, more sort of heavyweight material.
Oh. John asks, what tools are you using for your O'Reilly book?
It's a bit of a mishmash, which at this point, if it's not a mishmash, then I wonder who you are and how you're getting your next generation book done. I started out in Pages, which is a word processing program that I like mainly for its ability to just go full screen and black out all the distractions that seem to interrupt my writing flow during the day. But then because of a workflow that O'Reilly has set up, I moved from there to BB Edit, which is a very programmer-friendly text editing program, and I add a markup language called ASCII Doc, which is kind of like HTML, and from there it goes into a pretty impressive system that O'Reilly has put together that gets EPUB and PDF and Mobi, and then just to put this all in context, that doesn't even begin to yet include the EPUB 3 version of my book, which is in the works, which remains to be figured out exactly how we're going to develop some of the EPUB 3 features that I'm currently designing along with a few other people. So there's no easy answer right now, and I think anybody who doesn't want to get their hands dirty at all is going to be either frustrated or forced to work within very narrowly defined creative channels, which is, plain prose, long-form narrative.
Well, I think we've got time for just about one more question, and there were some questions that are more general from Stacy, and I think that a few people had asked this. It seems like there's a certain amount of risk in using tools from startups, and how would you recommend a risk?
Sorry, you just cut out at the very end. How would I recommend the risk?
Assessing the risk.
Yeah. Well, assessing the risk is harder, I think, than protecting yourself from the risk. And protecting yourself from the risk comes down to, I think, only working with platforms that let you take your code or your content, I should say, with you. So just to give one example, Pandanian, if you are composing directly in the browser, and at the end of every odd, 3 or 4 or 5 hours of writing, you have the ability to export anything from a text file to an EPUB file, that would make me feel a lot better. That to me provides some kind of protection. Assessing who is completely, even the companies that are not vulnerable to disappearance anytime soon, I think periodically give us formats that we can't use. I mean, Apple, right? What they did recently to people who are using Final Cut Pro. Now they since remedied that, but I guess my general point is here, it's awfully hard right now to completely eliminate your risk that you're working with some kind of tools provider and that your content is completely secure. So the best thing, I think, is some kind of tool that lets you on an ongoing basis and in an easy way export some kind of raw version of what you're working on. That's I think the best that we could do for it right now.
Okay, fair enough. And that was our last question, I think. Thank you so very, very much, Peter. This was a great webcast.
Cool.
Really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Kat. My pleasure. And love doing this stuff.